Hi, Graham. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, yeah. It's happy to be doing this. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, thank you. It's brilliant to have you on.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to the start with me guests. When did you first take an interest in music?
Um, Probably when I was went into my teenage, really, where I grew up in Levenshulme, there was like quite a lot of lads on our street started exchanging records, and we'd gather around. There was one good hi-fi system on our street, and every time a good record came out, we'd all gather like a group to listen to it and stuff. Um, So yeah, it was in the culture back then in the this would be the sort of early 70s. A lot of good music coming out and a lot of conversation about good music. And we were just kids, but when you would go to school, you were swapping records and listening to music in break times and dinner times and that I got to know some long-haired types in at school. One guy walked around with a Black Sabbath cross on, and I noticed him in the school play. He was playing fretless bass in the school play, and he took me interest. And I found out that he had a group, and I just bought an electric violin, which is a bit of a weird instrument, and fitted into his group. I couldn't play very well, but it didn't really matter back then because it was just on the dawn of punk, and there was that thing of like it's not about skill sets, it's about attitude, it's about uh, being brave and making a noise. So uh, that was a good doorway to come through for me. And that's always been my modus operandi, really. I've always been about noise and texture and not though I've been around sort of twiddly musicians, people with real skills, I've always taken a role of almost like a painter in music, using any sounds I can lay my hands on, which came in really handy later on in the rave thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, you were in a group called Biting Tongues. What was that group like?
Yeah, it's really hard to describe that group, but it was really creative, and I was one of the younger members of that group. It had elements of like Captain Beefheart and almost like Roxy music and surf music to it, but it had that post-punk thing as well of like funk and darkness. And it had this singer called Ken Hollins. Well, he wasn't a singer, he was a writer, really. He was really into William Burroughs and stuff. So it was about creative writing, and he just delivered all these texts over the top. You couldn't even call it rapping because we weren't aware of rapping back then, but it was very wordy and painted images of dystopian, you know, future and just playing with words. I think he's brilliant, and he puts out books now. He's got if you look him up, Ken Hollins. He's a well-known writer now, and it was such an interesting combination of people. Um, one of the guys, the drummer, he later joined Simply Red
Oh yeah.
for a yeah, we're all part of this sort of Didsbury kind of scene back then, where a lot of bands. It's interesting with Simply Red because they were also their rhythm section was a band called the Mothmen, who did some really psychedelic, oddball stuff. And you wouldn't think that you move it on into the 80s a little bit, and it became that kind of uh, everyday smooth kind of soul thing. If you go back to their roots, it's like it's proper weird stuff.
Well, your group, 808 State, started out as
Yeah.
a hip hop group, didn't they?
Yeah, in a way they did, yeah. As the 80s went on, I met all the Eastern Bloc lot. I had a cafe on Oldham Street opposite the Eastern Bloc shop. So they all used to come in and that's how I met Martin from Eastern Bloc. But the Eastern Bloc shop was also like this sort of drop-in centre for people interested in upcoming music and particularly hip hop. And kids would be making, demo tapes and bringing them into the shop. Because Martin was like this guy that took an interest in everything that was going on back then. You know, he was very opinionated, but he was very generous at the same time. You know, he was like, um, you know, quite an interesting sort of energy to Martin. He would always try and get things going. So I remember we had a load of meetings trying to get some government money to make a record, and we used to meet up in the Wimpy. I think it was Wimpy in Piccadilly back then before it was Burger King, wasn't it? And that was our office at the time in the Wimpy with all these groups of hip hop lads, some of which were MC Tunes and Guy Called Gerald. They had a band, and another band was MC Shine with Darren and Andrew, who later were in 808 State. You know, so they were called the Spin Masters, and we put on hip hop gigs at the boardwalk. That's the first thing we started doing. And we had the Ruthless Rap Assassins on as well as like the main act because they were a cut above everyone else. Really, they'd been doing it a bit longer and they were really good, you know. So, and then we eventually made this record called Hit Squad MCR, which was like 3 groups on that, and we just got the sampler and a computer at this studio called Spirit on Tarry Street, number 10 Tarry Street. I was doing a course there. It was called the School of Sound Recording. And that's still going now. That's in Hardwick now,
All
uh,
right.
School of Sound Recording. But I'd done this course at that point about sound engineering. So I had the keys to the car, as it were, and Martin funneled loads of projects through me into the studio, you know. So that's how it all began. And at the end of some of these hip hop gigs, me, Martin, and Gerald were really interested in the acid thing that we were hearing. Well, Gerald was really doing his own thing already. You know, he quite got in. You know, he's so singular, Gerald. He's kind of had that music going on. He already had a vision of what he was doing, and you know, but as we were all like a big team of people, we do acid at the end of acid the music at the end of these hip hop jams, you know, and you know it would involve whatever equipment was there, kind of thing, and these tapes became really important to us, like these tapes of the gigs, you know, and we decided to make this album, Newbuild, one weekend. So we just set all the equipment up, and it's largely, um, you know, done all in one weekend. You know, it's kind of like a jam, you know, with everything set up. It wasn't so much multi-tracked as we later got on to doing, you know. So yeah, that's how 808 began, kind of thing.
Obviously, at that time, was like New Order and stuff like that. Did you ever think of going down that route with a singer?
Yeah, probably people were suggesting it all the time, but you know, when you were listening to the acid thing, it wasn't about lyrics, was it? You know,
No.
some of the Chicago house stuff had really banal lyrical content. You know, it was just there as a noise rather than communicating. And it was quite sexual as well, quite a lot of the content of that early Chicago house, wasn't it? You know,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, it just didn't fit into our world at that time, you know. But we did dabble, you know, we did dabble with singers and stuff. There was one girl rapper called Vanessa, Fresh Vanessa, and one early 808 tune we did was Magical Dream. It's on the 90 album.
Yeah, that's a brilliant show, that one.
And I remember Darren writing the lyrics to that, and she was like their mate, and she came in and got coached through doing it because really she was a rapper and that was her comfort zone, you know. So, but I think she was about 14 or something at the time, you know. So, um, yeah, so we experimented, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was, like in that studio, I was doing stuff all the time, you know, with other bands, other singers, lots of different groups there, you know, and it could be from indie stuff to modern soul stuff. We're working with people like Denise Johnson and stuff on
Yeah.
with Biting Tongues. Biting Tongues had lost half its rhythm section to a group called Yargo. Don't know if people remember Yargo, but they were big in their day. They got signed to London Records. A singer called Basil Clark. The bass player was Paddy Steer, who's still doing brilliant stuff now. I've played with Paddy for like nearly 40 years now, doing different projects and that. And Phil Kirby, he later had a studio and produced loads of stuff like Mr. Scruff. He's an important character, Phil Kirby, in the Manchester music scene as an engineer and a place where people went to record. And in fact, me and Bjork recorded in his studio, which was the front room of his terraced house in Rusholme. We
Really?
did Army of Me in Phil Kirby's front room. uh, Initially, that's we again another productive weekend. She came over to Manchester and we wrote 2 tracks in a weekend. Sometimes the flow state of like doing music all the time and doing music from all different sources, uh, you're just in a flow state. Sometimes when you labor over music, that's not the music that's going to get through. You have to be in this kind of like almost half there in your head and doing music, and that's some of the most important valuable music just comes from this state of constantly doing music. It's a like a river flowing.
Well, we'll get back onto Bjork soon, but I just wanted to ask about the debut album you touched on. Like you mentioned, it took a weekend to do.
Newbuild.
Yeah, yeah. So with it, like that was one of the early dance albums, wasn't it? Did you always want to do an album?
I always thought in albums. I think Martin did. We were slightly older than, we'd be in I was in my late 20s, Martin was in his early 30s. We grew up in the album era. So it was hard for us to get rid of that idea, really. So, uh, whereas like, the younger lads, probably thought in terms of 12 inches and just tracks. But yeah, the idea of telling an arc of a story and, having little weird tracks in albums and, um, you know, B-side mentality and, all that kind of thing was really ingrained in people like me and Martin, just because we lived in album world, as you can see at the back.
So these tracks on this album came from your live shows earlier on, then?
No, these were all done in the studio. Um, all kind of, we tried to get a good sound on it.
Oh no, but I
But
mean, were you playing these live before you went
no,
into? Oh no.
when we played live, we never had a set list in
Ah,
that we just made it up.
yeah,
It was just improvised, you know what I mean? Um, yeah, quite often, like me and Gerald would there was parties going on in Manchester. That I remember, there was this guy, Keith Roadrider Dispatch, who was like a motorcycle dispatch place in Ancoats, and he was always having a party because he had this big warehouse, like a good space for a party, and he'd get us on all the time, and we'd turn up with bags of Roland equipment and set up and set off. That was it. Later on, when we'd done it a few times, I think the only things we ever had in the set list was we did a version of Confusion by New Order,
yeah,
and we did a version of Blue Monday. Because we knew how to program it by that point. We had it written down on a back of a fag packet or something, how to put the notes in. And we did a version of that in the studio that we did for Hot Night at the Hacienda. And we took it down. I remember we took it down on a cassette and John De Silva played it straight, right, like, literally recorded it like an hour before and he played it on Hot Night. And that later got re-released off cassette because we didn't record it other than on a cassette. Reflex, Aphex Twins label put
yeah,
that
yeah.
out. later down the line kind of thing. And Reflex also re-released Newbuild, and they did it on multiple pieces of vinyl, so the quality was upped considerably on that release. That came out in about '99, I think. And then we did another album of demos and live recordings. So there's a recording on this album called Pre-Build that is us, the very first jam we did at the Boardwalk in 1988. So that's on Pre-Build, and that's called Thermo Kings. I think it's on YouTube if you look it up. Yeah.
All right, nice one. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask, when I first heard Headhunters on that album, there's a
Yeah.
bit in it, and it sounds. I was like, "What's that song?" It sounds similar. And I want to dance with somebody with Whitney Houston.
No, well, yeah, that's just the 808 cowbell. It's actual sound in the 808 drum machine that
All right.
she used it on that track, yeah. Or the producer did, Narada Michael Walden. Um, yeah, that sound is in loads of electro tracks, isn't it? You know, it's got you keep hearing it in loads of stuff because it was like a sound on the 808 drum machine. Yeah, so yeah, and that sound said a lot. You know, it connected all this sort of electronic music together, all them that palette of sounds. You know, it was like a language. You know.
Would you get that a lot then when you'd hear bits in pop songs that sounded similar, obviously with the equipment and stuff?
I just think it's everywhere. Once you know what those sounds are, you know, you'll hear it everywhere, you know. And as I say, it was like it gave you a sort of family feeling. You united the world, that drum machine. Did you ever see that film, 808 the movie? And it's all about the 808 TR-808 drum machine. It was on Netflix for a while, but me and Gerald get interviewed in that film, but it's all about how that drum machine sort of, you know, came in. It's the whole history of that drum machine and all the musical influences that came from it, including I Want to Dance with Somebody. That's in it. Yeah. It's worth catching that movie. It's kind of quite comprehensive. It's about an hour and a bit long, you know.
Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Yeah. You know, with dance music and like acid house music and stuff, I feel like if you're not out and you're like at home, you've got to be in a certain mood to listen to it. Is that the same with you and recording and stuff and making it?
Uh, I'm a big music head, really, you know, so I, I listen to a broad range of stuff and always have done, really, you know. So, um, you know, that's the thing with a lot of dance music back then when it was just so much of it was being created and still is probably more being created every day now. Uh, the you know one thing when you go back to early 808 albums and stuff like that is it is so musical. It's quite melodic. It's quite layered. It's dense. It's not that thing that it's come from, the original kind of naivety of like house music. I really appreciate now when I go back to it to hear that really raw stuff with just a drum machine and a vocalist or something, you know. Um, but we were on a trajectory out of that almost immediately. You know, we thought the acid thing, for instance, you know, we love acid house and we absorbed loads of it at the clubs in Manchester, listening to it and trying to get hold of. One of the reasons we were doing it is that you couldn't get hold of it that easily. You know what I mean? Like some 12 inches came into the shop, they were gone. You know, it wasn't like you could go in HMV and buy it. You had to go to Spinning or Eastern Bloc, and they would cater to the DJs first. So as a sort of everyday punter, you didn't have access to all this stuff. You had to record it off the radio. We all had tapes of Stu Allen's show off, you know, Key 103 um, and later the 808 State Show, which Darren and Andrew presented for years on Sunset Radio and then Galaxy and Kiss. Like their tapes, and people have been collating them on the internet now, were the people just used to bring them in the shops and go, this tune, that tune. You know, it was like the newspaper of dance music of the time, you know. It was really important show that, because Eastern Bloc gave them all the records. They did a chart every week. Um, Favorites popped up. They interviewed local talent coming in all the time. It was like it's really well loved, that show. And yeah, you can find it, if you go Sunset, 808 State Sunset shows on YouTube, there's hundreds of them,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
really fun. When we first started that show, all four of us went in to do that show, and it became obvious that um, Darren and Andrew just had it down. They had this natural comedy between them, and they just ran with it, and yeah, it's brilliant, that show.
yeah. Just left it to them two.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean they were also like a group within a group, because like they did all the DJing together as well. They
Yeah,
DJ Thunderdome, for instance, which was really important in the Manchester scene. Everyone polarizes it with the Hacienda, and I was a Hacienda head because in Biting Tongues I got a get in free card because we were on factory. So I was there, 3 or 4 times a week. I lived in the place. But Darren and Andrew, being younger, they sometimes had trouble getting in there because there was a bit of a door policy. And so when they had the Thunderdome going, that was a different vibe in there. North Manchester, a lot younger crowd, a bit harder music, and that became its own scene. In fact, when we did Pacific State, they were playing it off cassette in there originally, and it kind of took hold there before it took hold in the Hacienda.
I wanted
So
to ask that, like, like when that song came out and it's like big and playing everywhere. What is that like hearing it when you're going out and stuff? And it's
well, it was a gradual thing, you know what I mean? It was like it was really colloquial at first, really kind of Manchester. It was like really, and the shop was really important in it, Eastern Bloc, because Martin was banging it over the counter and being evangelical about it and insisting people had it, and he was connected with all the distributor thing and that. So, and then Gary Davis heard it in Ibiza and started playing it on Radio One. I mean, it wasn't a single; it was on like an EP. So it
yeah,
was like a track on an EP. It wasn't pushed as a single at the time. We were just doing tracks. So when Gary Davis picked up on it and started playing it on daytime Radio One, normally you have to have a plugger to do that. Like a record company man really sort of like pushing for that, and that didn't. It just happened naturally. So. But a lot of things were happening naturally in 1989 and stuff, weren't they? There was a vibe, and it fitted. It so
it,
fitted. It was like riding a good. It's like being a surfer and riding a wave in. It was just perfect timing, perfect sort of sound for that feeling of optimism at the end of there was this feeling of optimism at the end of the 80s. And I've told this story before, but I remember my mum ringing up and saying, "They played your tune on News at 10," and it was the Berlin Wall coming down.
really?
Yeah, yeah. And it was like a news item on the Berlin Wall being coming down. And there was like a party going on in the background, and it was like, that our music was in that, and it was like, oh, a perfect, connection.
What was that Pacific State or was it another song?
Yeah, yeah, Pacific State, yeah.
Jeez, what did that must be mental, like a big moment in
It's more
history. Like,
mental in the rear view mirror. It seems more mental, but at the time, it was kind of like, yeah. I mean, it was all good. It was all. It felt like an important record at the time. It seemed to sum a lot of things up. And and it was kind of lyrical as well. So it had this emotional quality to it. We get a lot of people that, sort of it means a lot to a lot of people. And every time we do gigs now, people say, "Oh, do you ever get fed up of playing it?" It's like, no, I never get fed up of playing it. I actually look forward to playing it. It's such a brilliant feeling. I played the saxophone on it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I've never played it the same way twice, I don't think. I always you got to play the melody, but there's always a bit. there's always a bit of jazz noodling on it these days, you know what I mean? And I absolutely love that. It's like throwing yourself off a cliff, like paragliding or something. It's a brilliant feeling. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that actually, because you mentioned it before earlier in the interview. Like you never played saxophone before, but then you played on that track. Was it all
Yeah.
you mentioned before? Like, if you're like a painter and you can try to get out of an instrument what you can.
Well, in Biting Tongues, it was quite there was saxophones in Biting Tongues, and there was like a track where I played that instrument, but it was my mate played saxophone. There was somewhere we tried to be like a brass section, and I played. He had two saxophones. I used to play that. I had a clarinet for years, you know, Squidward, you know, giving it loads of that. Uh, but I'd never had formal lessons, is what I'm saying. You know, I just pick an instrument up and get to know it.
Is that the exciting part of it for you, though? Like not knowing what's going to come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you're trying to emulate the records that you love. You know, so um, but you know, for years in Biting Tongues, it was about um just trying to make as much noise as possible. And when we got to record in a recording studio with Biting Tongues, it was really super exciting because then you could put like echoes and reverbs and all the stuff that made it sound more like a record. I got really fascinated by that, and that's why I ended up trying to be a sound engineer, you know, because there weren't too many of them around when back in the 80s. There was only a handful of people. There's Martin Hannett in Manchester. There's another guy called Stuart James, and he made some of our records with us. But they were quite rare characters, you know, and for a lot of the part, quite conservative in their way they made records. Those two I just mentioned weren't. I admired them because they had an imagination, you know, and I wanted to continue that. You know, I wanted to continue that. We used to listen to a lot of Miles Davis 1970s records, and they had this producer called Tio Macero. And what he did is just record all these sessions, and they might be 2 hours long, and then chop them in to 30 minutes with the razor blade. You know what I mean? He'd
Yeah,
get it, put that bit in, take the first bit, put it back in, you know, and he made it like a collage, you know. And if you go back to albums like Newbuild, it's exactly Tio Macero kind of thinking. It's like, you know, take this bit, you know, add this, you know, sort of chopping stuff, razor blades, taped. And that's why you can never, some of those 808 State records from the early years, you can never DJ them really successfully because they got really bad edits. So the grid, the grid's got kinks in it, you know, and it's you know, it always comes at the wrong moment kind of thing. But that was the thinking, you know, in a lot of those early 808 State records is like, this is audio material, how then cut it into shapes, you know.
yeah,
Uh, it was quite an odd way of making records. And, you know, now in recent times, it's like we did, you know, Play 90 in its entirety at the New Century Hall last December. And to go back and try and recreate some of those things, it's really quite tough to get to grips with the methods that we used back then. And we're doing Excel this year. We've got in the winter we're doing an Excel tour, and that's even harder because that's the point where we had a lot of the early 808 stuff is 16 track, and now by the time we're doing Excel, it was 32 tracks. So you know it's really elaborate and complicated.
are you looking forward to it though?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah, it's a bit of an odd one for me, and you know, I want to always be presenting what we're up to now, you know. So that's what we do at these gigs. We do like one album for the fans, and then we do a second set of exactly, you know, it's got to feel right, you know, it's got to
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, when you're in them social situations, there's no room for error. You know what I mean? They want to have it, and you've got to give it them. You know what I mean? It's like It's yeah, I always enjoyed the live thing. You know, it's I think we've honed it down to something that's quite effective now.
Yeah,
Um,
good.
yeah, I mean, for years and years we've been doing it now, and we've learned a lot over the years about how to deliver, I think, you know.
You touched on how important Pacific State was for fans, but some people say it was like the track of the summer of '89. What was it like recording that song and seeing it grow? Like you mentioned, it grew and grew, but when it exploded, what was that like watching it?
Um, oh, well, yeah, I mean, it was nothing but euphoric, you know. It was kind of, it was just awesome to be part of the conversation, you know, because so many great records came out every week back then. You know, it was particularly having the connection with the record shop, you had a real sense of that. You know, it's like, oh, what's in today, you know, and what are the, you know, Martin had arrived in the studio with a massive bag of records, you know, we were really in touch with it. And so to even be part of that conversation and for it to be still a relevant tune all these years later is amazing, you know, because back then you felt like it would be hot for a month or two or something. Do you know what I mean? The whole thing was moving so fast. You know, odd records dropping in there would eclipse other records, and you know, it's a fast-moving scene. Uh, so I'd look back on sort of 88, 89, 90, 91 as being a really exciting period. And then everything started getting a bit genre based in about 92, 93 kind of thing. Everything became about the DJs more.
Yeah,
You know, so the DJ will play a style. And what I loved about the other stuff was like it was a real mixture of different genres. You know, it's quite eclectic down the hacienda and stuff. You know, you'd hear all kinds of music played next to each other. You know, it's much more that tradition that comes from the New York scene, you know,
yeah, yeah,
of like music lovers, you know.
yeah. It
It
keeps
got,
it fresh though, doesn't it? Instead of
yeah, it was all about the love of the music. And, you
yeah,
know, Manchester, like, Manchester had that thing of like knowledge of music that was passed on through the scene and that total enthusiasm for the history of that music, and you know it was held dear, you know, in places not just the hacienda, but you know I wouldn't discount that as being really important. But clubs like the Gallery, you know, Thunderdome, yeah, like all down Whitworth Street, there's loads of different scenes going on, you know. The Brick House was had this sort of Belgium hardcore thing going on, and then Legends was a bit more you know, that was going way before the hacienda scene, but playing all the electro and sort of American R&B stuff. So yeah, it was a rich. I look back at it as being a really rich time for music, you know, and just to even pop one in the back of the net in that era, uh, still feels like a badge of honor in a lot of ways, you know. And we had quite a few as well, you know. We
yeah, yeah.
it's weird for us to be suddenly like a pop band, you know, because like you got one on Radio One and then you're in, you got your foot in the door, and then you get another weird one in there. Like for instance, In Your Face, what a weird pop record. I don't know if you know that track, but
Yeah, yeah.
that has a life of its own, doesn't it? You know, it's like it's got this anti-American speech on the beginning of it, kind of thing, and then it goes into this sort of like almost orchestral, bombastic mad pop tune with loads of wiggly synths, and it's like it's not a pop record, but it was
It
top
worked.
10. And then Bicep did that mix of it about
Yeah,
5 years ago. That went ballistic as well, and it's like uh, you know, it's got all these different lives, you know. And Cubic is another one. Cubic has got its own life, you know. The Kneecap, that Irish language rap band, sampled it last year, and that's just gone off on another direction.
really, yeah.
Yeah, and Bob Villain, he sampled it. You know, it keeps having another life. That riff, you know, that yeah. There's so many versions of it as well. You know, so yeah, I feel really proud of the fact that we penetrated popular culture, and it wasn't just and yeah, it wasn't just a niche little thing. It affected a lot of people at that time, you know.
Did you
Plus,
like
we took
it?
it live. We were the first sort of rave bands to take it live, you know, and do things like the G-mex in Manchester, you know, like a big, that's 10,000 people gig. You know, this was not normal. You know, this was, you know, pioneering stuff, you know.
Well, we'll talk
And
about that G-Mex gig actually. What was that day like?
oh yeah, amazing. Yeah. We did one in 90, I think it was, with Happy Mondays. We were the support band on the
Yeah,
Happy Mondays one. And that was an incredible atmosphere. You know, it was right at the peak of Madchester. And the atmosphere was just incredible. You know, it was like a gathering of the tribes, but you know, it just felt a moment in history, that gig, you know. And then it became like a badge of honor to try and do the G-Mex. A lot of the other bands, like in Spirals, did it.
yeah.
You know, it was like you have to prove yourself and do it. Well, we managed to do 2 nights of it. So that was, yeah, re very validating, you know, at that point in time. There's a film on YouTube about it, 808 State G-Mex Turbo Rave is what we call it. We assembled the loudest PA system we could possibly put together for that. It was like your balls shook and your kidneys wobbled, you know. It was something, you know. So yeah, and what struck me about that is the age group was really, really young because a lot of you know, early teens couldn't go out raving or didn't, not officially. Do you know what I mean? And it was like you put on an event like that, and it's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a parent-friendly rave, but it was accepted that you could be underage and be there.
Yeah.
And that's the whole vibe you get in that video. They interview a load of kids outside the G-Mex, and it's like, wow, they're all like 13 and stuff, you know. So it was it shows you that the older generation that were going out raving had an effect on all the kids coming up, and you got to remember that the media wasn't had only just cottoned onto it by that point. People like the Enemy were really slow in picking up on the rave thing. They were more happy if you played guitars, you know. So the Stone Roses would be on the cover, or you know, guitar bands fitted there. And there was no internet to spread this stuff back then, you know what I mean? But eventually, like you know, they had to acknowledge that the electronic music scene uh, had moved into prime position. And you noticed it at things like Glastonbury. We were the last band on at Glastonbury in '92, and not a lot of people know that. Or there's not a lot of knowledge of that because they didn't put it on TV back then. But '92 was the first year that a lot of electronic bands were on the main stages. So like the Orb, the Shaman, us. And then I think Orbital did it in '94, was it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it was this breaking through and changing the culture is often like you know, work at the coalface. You know what I mean? You're doing that stuff, and that felt amazing. You know, when we did our first British tour, it felt like a lot of connections, and it wasn't like a industry of you know, just doing gigs. It was like spreading the gospel or something. That's how it felt, you know, that it felt like you were joining the dots, and people all over the country were reading off the same hymn sheet, as it were, you know what I mean? And it was like communion. Sorry to get all religious about it, but that's how it felt. You know, it did
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
it felt like a change. It felt like this surge of energy and an empowerment to, you know, largely, uh, you know, people from all kinds of backgrounds, but a real working class thing as well. You know, that's one thing that changed. It also broke gender barriers. You know, going out at those times, it was a breakdown, and it wasn't about courting anymore. A lot of nightclub activity before that was about boy meets girl and all that kind of thing, and that had gone. That was just it was like gender free, race free, kind of all these boundaries coming down. And that's what I remember about it. That's the optimism, but also sort of surges in the music as well. It was kind of it can't help but affect the music you were doing at that time. This optimism.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it does sound like I just missed out on it, but it does sound like an exciting time. But
Remember how rubbish it was before, though. It was bleak before. It was kind of all them years of Thatcher's Britain, and I think I was on the dole for about 8 years. You know what I mean? That's how I got to spend a lot of time doing music because I wasn't impaired. You know,
yeah, yeah.
Wise, you know what I mean? It was just me and my mates, and we all did music, and we was like, well, we might as well do music. It's like it was like a university to us, to have that free experimental time, to explore what you could do with music, and not go like, oh, he's got a job, he can't. I mean, I was a postman for a bit. But that job kind of fitted in between the hours of 5:30 and 8 a.m. kind of thing, so it
What about
fitted my
did you have a
musician life.
cafe as well?
Yeah, 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 on Oldham Street. Yeah, yeah, I did that for a bit. I did all kinds of sort of like washing up jobs and things like that. It was the sort of the economy of the time. All musicians I knew back then worked in about three different restaurants, the same three restaurants.
Regular at the cafe. Well, he was there sometimes. Was John Peel? He was important in the band's history,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, because he used to come to Manchester every few months, visit the record shops, like Piccadilly Records and Eastern Bloc, and he'd do a bit of shopping, but he'd also almost do like a clinic in my cafe where people would come and bring him latest releases or demo cassettes, things like that. So we'd always do a at the end of the day, you'd do a spot in there kind of thing. That's where we gave him Newbuild there. Yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was one of the first people to play it. He played tons of our stuff actually. Somebody raided his. There's like a John Peel archive, and you can look up all the records he's ever played, kind of thing. And he's played every one of the records that I've ever made. Going way back to Biting Tongues and stuff. He always played it, and it was said like that. It kept you alive. You know what I mean? It spread your word. It was so important. And
Hey,
really, really open to new ideas as well. Yeah.
did you ever go do a John Peel show?
No, we were offered one, and we heard that New Order recorded it in their own studio, and we liked that idea because the way we made records was a bit weird, and it wasn't about performing as such. It was more production, kind of cooking, like I was saying about the editing and all that kind of thing. We
Yeah.
wanted control over it, that's and he agreed to that, but the BBC didn't. So that went a bit pear-shaped, yeah. But we should have gone and done a Peel session. I know Gerald went and did a Peel session,
Oh,
and
did it?
those Peel session records that came out, they were kind of important,
He had a big hit with Voodoo Ray. Was that around the same time as Pacific State?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a little bit before, I think, or at least he'd recorded it a little bit before. When we used to go out doing gigs and stuff, I was saying about we never had a set list, but quite often Voodoo Ray was in the set list because he knew how he had it in the 303 and he knew how to set it up, kind of thing. There's a recording I've got of we're playing at International One in Manchester, and it's this program called Meltdown on BBC Radio Manchester, and I think it's the Inspirals are on that gig, Dub Sex are on that gig, and then there's a 20-minute 808 state section, but we're not on the stage. We're at the mixing desk because all our wires were too much, you know. So we'd set up at the mixing desk, and it's like a 20-minute version of Voodoo Ray,
Really?
and yeah, and that was on the radio, and we didn't think about things back then. It was just sort of there wasn't this kind of like career thing going on. It was just sort of like, ooh, gig, ooh, opportunity, you know. So like if he got a gig as Guy Called Gerald, quite often I'd go and do the sound or something, or it was like that footage at the swimming baths. It's like that's a Guy Called Gerald gig, but I'm pressing a sampler and Colin Thorpe's playing a keyboard and stuff. And that was really random because it's like whoever was on the end of the phone kind of thing to a certain extent. We did one a 1988 all-nighter 808 State at New Century Hall, and that's got Colin Thorpe in it from Chapter and the Verse and some rap. It's probably got MC Tunes on it. You know, it's
Yeah.
whoever you it's thrown together on the night a lot of the time, you know. And we did one at the Ritz where we did Guy Called Gerald and 808. And, it's literally sort of the same people with a different hat on, different toasters on it. Uh, yeah, but it was really blurry and it wasn't this career orientated thing. So he always had his Guy Called Gerald moniker. And I think he did Hot Lemonade around about the time we did Newbuild. I
Yeah.
think they're
He was
more or
on
less.
Newbuild, wasn't
Oh yeah, yeah.
he? Yeah, yeah.
He is, main part of Newbuild. Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can't listen to Newbuild and not hear Gerald. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I mean, we were a three-piece, but and that's there's like three 101s and a lot of knob twiddling and like hands on the desk and uh, but you listen to Newbuild and then listen to Hot Lemonade, and you hear a different kind of aesthetic on the two things, but it's still Gerald, doing his thing.
Is that hard to do? That like change it but keep your style in it in a way.
Well, I think some of it just comes naturally if you put certain people in a room.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just the way a blend of people work. But they are different, you know what I mean? So, but he that Voodoo Ray was just like a massive tune at the Hacienda. It had that had a massive life of its own, and there became a point in 808 where we were trying to organize things and get signed and all that, trying to get some money behind it. And a lot of the time Gerald would be off doing his Guy Called Gerald thing, or you couldn't track him down, and things got complicated. And you got to remember how young he was, like 19 or something at the time, and you know it was quite a naive time. And Martin was kind of more businessy, because they had the shop and they had the sort of like they were used to running a business. So there was a bit of argy-bargy about, how quick money comes through and all that kind of thing.
yeah,
Obviously, it takes, it doesn't appear in a month, it takes a while. So things sort of, there was at that time, there was a bit of argy-bargy going on. But when I go back now, I feel like banging all our heads together because we're just kind of it could have been dealt with better. But everything was moving dead fast. You know what I mean? When we got ZTT up and they came to see us because they saw us doing an MC Tunes thing on Snub TV, which was a tea time telly thing. They came up with interest because of MC Tunes. And then they found out we had the shop and the radio station and the studio. And so we were attractive to a company like ZTT. We were also talking to Deconstruction and Factory at that time. So there was a lot of meetings in the Britannia Hotel and a lot of restaurants and all that. There was a lot of courting going on. And, it just reached a point where we had to deliver an album before Christmas and all this kind of thing. It was real high it was real got really high pressure of like, deliver, otherwise you'll miss the Christmas market and you'll miss the it was quite it's quite an odd way to work. But we had sat on quite a lot of tunes, but even that 90 album was done pretty quick.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then you couldn't hang around, you had to get on to the next one. And but I love that pressure. I love the pressure of like um being fed into the machine, as it were. You know what I mean? I wasn't, we'd done the indie thing for a while, and it was it didn't have an impact on your life. I was still, living in a crap flat and sort of subsistence existing really thinly. We all were, apart from Martin, because because they had the shop. But so you're really tense in them times, of just how do I live, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Jesus.
So going back to them times, there wasn't this clear view of the future or where it would lead, or it was this how do I reach rent next week, So yeah, it was weird times.
I had Phil Hartnell on the channel from Orbital, and he was talking about when they played Top of the Pops with Chime, and he didn't like having to mime. What was it like when you were on Top of the Pops?
Oh, we knew we had to mime. We didn't fight that, I don't think. We're just happy to be on top of the pops, I think. I mean, that was a big deal. Big deal for me,
How many times did you do Top of the Pops?
Yeah, oh God, quite a lot. I would say something like 8 times or something like that. Because I did it with Bjork a couple of times as well. So, um, but yeah, we mind, and it involved a lot of clothes shopping with the band. It's like, what are we gonna wear and all that kind of thing. There's like sort of monging round in clothes shops, and I chose to mime with that electronic wind instrument instead of the saxophone because I thought it was more techno. Look more techno. And ever since then, people think that that's the thing that's on the record, and it isn't. It's a soprano saxophone. But yeah, yeah. I mean, we just knew that we were going to mime. We just had to perform any which way we could back then. We were none of us had performance kind of experience apart from me, probably. I mean, I'd done hundreds of gigs by then. But
Yeah.
the rest of them, um, yeah, we had to look like a band all of a sudden, and that it was quite awkward at times, to try and be a band,
Yeah,
when
you
we were.
forget really, don't you, that Andy and Darren was pretty new to it still at that point, weren't
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they've done the hip hop gig things, but that's and Tunes was an amazing performer, wasn't it? MC
they?
Tunes was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, you just have to, you could set him off anywhere, it's like a Tasmanian devil, wasn't he always had his dancers with him as well, which I always remember them sort of rehearsing the dancing everywhere, they were all, if they weren't, it means if they weren't sort of doing music, they were doing dancing, it was really important to them. Gerald was a dancer as well. Him and his brother used to go to some like contemporary dance class on Oxford Road.
Yeah, Kermit used to do like breakdance and stuff as well, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a real thing back then to there's all that stuff on Market Street as well of like, breakdancing and the electro thing. Because they were real electro boys, the younger lot, they were really into and that is evident in some of the music is like, very influenced by all that street sound stuff. Every time Tunes had a party in Russia, it'd be the electro box set, Street Sounds electro box set. We knew it inside out. We knew it to death, kind of thing.
I've had MC tunes on as well. How do you look back at
Yeah.
that album?
Again, that we had to do that really quick. We only had a couple of tunes. We had the only rhyme that bites. That was in the bag, kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, we knew we had a good one there. We knew we had a sort of a
That's a
hit.
brilliant song. Yeah, brilliant.
And then we had to drum up a whole album in about 6 weeks or something. We didn't have long. And he had a load of raps already because he had like an exercise book full of raps and stuff. But the music was pretty weird. I don't think when you talk to Tunes now, I don't think he stands by that album quite as much as the second one that he did, which he was more in control of musically. Whereas the first album is definitely kind of we've got a sampler and we're going to use it. It was all kinds of influences and oddball beats in that. I really rate that album as the beats on it and that all the musical aspects of that album is super weird. But it wasn't what a hip hop head would
Yeah.
stand by. You know what I mean? It didn't have the traditions of hip hop. It was super abstract and more like an 808 album.
How did you go back to work with him?
As I said, like ZTT came up because I'd seen him on the TV, and in some ways, he got a separate deal to us. We had the same manager actually.
Ah, right.
Yeah, a guy called Ron Atkinson. That not the manager of United. But it sounded very managerial. But Ron was one of the guys who used to import American dance music into Manchester. He had a shop in Altrincham called Vinyl Mania. But he used to go out on these white vans and deliver to Spinning, and so he's really connected on the scene and knew what was going on with dance music. He had a lot of experience in A&R and things like this. So he knew ZTT as well. He knew some of the guys there from way back, like Stiff Records or something like that. So that's how that allegiance kind of meant that we both got signed at the same time with two separate deals.
All right.
So
Yeah.
that was a bit of a jackpot, really, when you think about it. For a company like ZTT, who were known for quite arty stuff, quite conceptual music like Art of Noise and Propaganda, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, to take on a rapper, it's quite a brave move, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there weren't that many British rappers, let alone white British rappers. But it's a risk. But Paul Morley was the guy that was really enthusiastic about tunes. Yeah. So yeah, we came as we did come as a package, but not really. We were two packages. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you as well. Like, obviously, that album did well as well, did it? So you're getting this like commercial success. Like we say, you went on top of the pops with MC tours and stuff.
Yeah, a couple of times with that.
Yeah, yeah. But with when you first went on with Pacific State, I don't know who was
Yeah.
presenting it, but he says like this is from an underground. And how does this? What does he say? Like sort of like an underground group that haven't done this before. Or that. How did you find that going from underground to commercial? Personally.
Well, it was a shock, but it was not. It was not a horrible shock. It felt right in the country at that point. As I say, we felt like we were representing something that was genuinely going on. It felt like we represented something bigger than we were, be that the Manchester scene or the rave scene. And the rave scene was international. That's another sense of what we had through the shop. We knew it wasn't just in our town or in our country. We knew it was like, connected to places like Italy and the Balearic thing, the Spanish thing, the American stuff. We joined Tommy Boy quite soon after we released 90. We got like a distribution deal through Tommy Boy, which is like for us, and particularly Darren and Andrew, who were like mad hip hop heads, and Martin, to be on the major American hip hop label Tommy Boy was just, you know, yeah, that was like a hand in the air, hands in the air moment. It was just incredible to be with them. And they were great. They had a great understanding of what they were doing. When we first went to New York, we got taken around all these different scenes in New York. It's like, oh, we have to go meet the Latin community, the Latin record shops. We have to go meet uh, all the gay music scene and all the clubbers that, all the different people that supply those clubs and understand what was going on there. If you listen to a lot of the Tommy Boy remixes, it's all aimed at New York gay scene in 1992 or whatever, even 1991 and that, Um, uh, yeah, and being from the UK, people were really confused about that, because it was slotting into all this different bracketed radio things in America. And quite often we got stuck with industrial music, like Skinny Puppy and Front 242 because they didn't know how to categorize us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so but they really worked at it and tried to expand it. They signed LFO at the same time as us as well, so we were quite often uh, presented together into America that way. But a lot of the time we went then consequently went touring in America, and that required a lot of money behind it, to put us lot on a bus and go around America. You have tour support, so that's money that you've not earned yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just took all our mates and things, and it was just sort of like it was a real adventure, but we didn't know what we were doing really, you know what I mean? It was just sort of like, hey, and it's sort of come along,
The
the
lad's
bus.
holiday.
Yeah. There was all kinds of add-ons. We took Hugh and Clark came, Fonzo Buller, uh, uh, Steve Roof, all kinds, and it's like they did sort of, like Fonzo did MCing and stuff like that. And but when I think about it now, there was no sort of economic plan to doing that. It was just crazy at the time. But yeah, I wouldn't have missed it for the world, And I think it
Yeah.
was we definitely delivered vibe at that point. And we learned to be how to do a bit more performing, and we learned, with American audiences, you really had to sort of get it together and perform, deliver a show. So it was like baptism of fire, but good.
Is this the time when 90 USA came out then?
Yeah, there
So
was that one, and then we did a tour on each album basically.
what were the audiences like? 'Cause obviously British groups always want to crack American. What was it
Yeah.
your experience like?
We found that there was like rave scenes dotted around. Like for instance, we were quite surprised at how big the rave scene in Texas was.
Really?
So Dallas was always a great gig, because they had, and you'd find it was down to one radio station that was playing the music. There was a radio station near LA called Mars FM, and it was a techno station. And I think it was one of the first techno stations in America. And so when we played LA, we did a massive rave in like a G-mex type thing. It was um, the LA, what was it called? Long Beach Exhibition Center,
All
and
right.
that was a massive rave. Bjork played on that one because she
All
was
right.
out there doing that last Sugar Cubes album. So yeah, we had a right time there driving there. It's sort of like because she got to know LA by that point, so we went to loads of parties and went, partying it up in LA, and that gig was pretty good. And then she got on our bus and came to San Francisco, and we did that, and that was a great scene. New York was obviously a hot spot, but but filling in between these places were like places that were really kind of like
Yeah.
rock clubs. And yeah, and we'd have all our laser system in there. Sometimes we were playing in something that was like the size of the Roadhouse, but we'd have lasers in there. And we like, yeah, it was just sort of too yeah, there was a lot of diversity in what we were doing, but that felt good. We met a lot of people, and the American people were so kind of open and friendly. I was quite shocked by it. You know what I mean? It's like it might seem like a different era now. I don't know. It's been a long time since we've been there. So yeah.
Is there any other countries you played that like you that got it that you didn't think would?
Oh, Japan.
And everybody says that, whatever music genre, it's like Japan, right? You won't think you're in
Yeah,
Japan, would you? But yeah, you see people as like
absolutely.
gods, don't
Yeah,
they? Yeah, yeah.
absolutely fitted in Japan. They, really got behind us, and they're really loyal as well. You know, those gigs felt really special. To go all that way into a country that felt so different to ours, and back in the 90s, I've been over the years, you know what I mean, and everywhere becomes like everywhere else eventually. But back then in the early 90s, it was singular and different to us, But it's slightly lost its well, it's just everywhere's become like everything's become global, and you forget how
Yeah.
unglobal things were going back to the end of the 80s and 90s. It wasn't quite the globalized global village that some of the rave thing helped to pull together. That was one of the other things about the rave scene is it connected not only the country up, which it did. I remember us just forming alliances in places like Glasgow or in London and stuff. Like the country didn't feel as connected. I don't know whether that's a personal thing, but I believe it's bigger than that. The rave thing did bring people from all over the place and create this sort of wider community. Uh, and it did that globally as well, to go to like Ibiza and where else to go? We went some odd places, Scandinavia and you know, Eastern Europe and stuff. It felt like a connecting up and that again, this sort of community, this communion. And it saddens me these days that that thing is challenged and threatened in this political climate of the moment, because it's just becoming slightly the opposite of that feeling, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I heard you say in an interview that you'd played in Dubai and you were saying that like rave music's gone all over the world and now it's time to take it to different planets and stuff.
That Dubai, yeah, we did a Dubai gig just before Andrew passed away, and that felt weird because we played on a golf course.
Really?
He'll take all the equipment on golf buggies into the middle of this golf course. And it's like, uh, yeah, it was a bit bizarre that one.
What is the
Yeah.
like most bizarre venue you've played at? That, a golf course.
No, I don't know really. And some are memorable. We were playing in a quarry in Ibiza was a really good one. Um, uh, Playing Hollywood Bowl was very memorable for me. That felt like a real achievement. I can hear cooking in the kitchen. I think somebody's left something on. Hang on. Oh, it's outside. Sorry. Right. No, yeah, I don't know. I'll probably find a good answer to that once we're finished. But yeah.
You mentioned before you're taking a XL on the road in at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Um, that's my favourite album of 808 State. What was it like doing that album?
Yeah, I think we'd got some momentum by then. We had a bit more confidence in what we were doing. Um, yeah, it had a lot of energy to it. Uh, it was again, like I said, we had an expanded palette, and by that point, we were buying loads of synthesizers and stuff. There was like this airline pilot who used to fly to Canada a lot and come back with like you could pick up old vintage synths really cheap in Canada and America at that point. And he'd come back and sell them to people like Vince Clarke. But
Yeah.
because we were near Manchester Airport, he'd often visit us first. So I bought quite a few synths off this guy, kind of thing. So we're learning to we had more mad machines to play with and stuff, you know. So it felt like a very playful album, you know. Felt like you know, we luxurious in a way that we had the time and energy to put in. It wasn't as much of a rush to
Yeah.
do as well. And then we did the thing of getting singers on it as well,
Yeah.
which was
How did
unusual. It was unusual to do that on a
oh,
rave record.
I was just how did Bjork come about?
Well, she actually rang us up. We recorded Excel mostly in this studio in Cheadle called Revolution. And I think she'd got through to our office and then they found us at the studio. And it's like, oh, there's a call from somebody from Iceland. And it was her, you know. And she said how she'd been listening to Newbuild and Quadrastate and 90 on the Sugar Cubes tour bus. You know, she was getting into the electronic clubbing thing. You know, they were going all around Europe and going to raves, and you know, she was really interested in moving into an electronic based thing. One of her favorite bands at that point was Public Enemy. You
Really?
know, yeah,
Yeah.
she was really into that. You know. Well, and then yeah, so we arranged to meet up. We were doing the Word in London, you know, that Terry Christian Friday
Yeah.
night,
Yeah.
and we met her there, and she played us this cassette of some of the tracks off debut, and it was you know, things like Anchor Song and Violently Happy and things like that. But it was played on with a brass band, almost like a brass band, like saxophones and trombones and trumpet. No words on them. It's like this is my music kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yes, it's quite puzzling, you know. But so anyway, we invited her to come to the studio because we were working on Excel, and she came and we played her a couple of tracks that we thought might fit vocals. And she just went off into the rain kind of thing in Cheadle, came back with one song, and then the following day she improvised over one called Kumar. It was quite a jazzy, weird three, four kind of waltz kind of thing. It was odd for one of our tunes, you know what I mean? But she did this brilliant sort of jazzy improvisation over the top of it, and it was like I absolutely loved it. You know, it's like, and that's the first the Kumar. It's the first take that you hear there. You
Jeez.
know, yeah, and it's yeah, and a bit of magic to it. You know, and then after that, you know, we started sending each other cassettes and tapes all the time, and you know, that one thing, you know, she came to Manchester quite often and sort of, you know, we went clubbing and just doing music, you know, messing about with music and stuff. So that's before she was like ultra famous and you could go in Morrison's and go to the swimming baths and things, you know what I mean? You could just do normal stuff, you know what I mean? But, you know, a few years later, you couldn't do the normal stuff anymore, you know what I mean?
That became massive, didn't she?
Yeah. I mean, she was sort of indie famous, wasn't she, through the Sugar Cubes, you know. But you know, we went out all the time, you know, and she moved to London and you know, spent a lot of time going backwards and forwards and you know, she had that initial period in London where she just was really gregarious and knew everyone and people were really interested in what she was doing. So it was really good for me. I got to meet loads of people through that, you know. And you know, I just look back on that as a bit of a sort of golden time of like, you know, where the British music scene was in its heyday. You know, it became from what we were doing into a global sort of market, really. You know, it became like this really interesting music scene. You know, things like Massive Attack, for instance. You know what I mean? That
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you
I mean,
enjoy them other
she was
like?
working with Nelly Hooper, who was like Massive Attack, one of the members of that originally. So there was an openness to music. What can we do with music? How can we expand it? How can we take this dance music thing and make it work as albums? So that's what we were trying to do. You take an album like Don Solaris of ours.
Yeah.
You can't really say it's club music. It's not. It's mind music. It's album music. It fits in more with that trip hop thing of the time. And there's some traces of drum and bass at the time. That's another thing I remember about going out with Bjork in London. I remember the first time she took me down the YMCA on Tottenham Court Road, and it was a metalheads night, with Goldie playing,
Oh
and it
yeah.
was like, yeah, it just felt like a page turner. It's like, oh wow, what it's like I've never heard this intensity in music and this kind of elasticity in music. And then we used to go to the Blue Note to metal head nights all the time and stuff, and that was an exciting time in music too. It felt like a breakthrough, like all that straight 4/4 with pianos and vocals. It was not my thing, this was more the abstract thing again. It's almost like the abstract thing of Acid House coming back, it was like that feeling. It was really inspiring, and it had an effect on our music. Yeah.
What is your favorite 808 State album?
Um, I would say I think the most polished is the wrong word, but yeah, Don Solaris is special to me. Yeah, it was a point where I had a problem with Gorgeous when we did Gorgeous. Though looking back on it now, I think that album stands up really well, and we play a lot of it in our set over the years. Um, but at the time, I was just in a personal bad in my personal life. It was a difficult time. Um, so those kind of baggage things follow you. You know what I mean? And it's the same with that last album, Transmission Suite. It's dead like, I'm not ready to go back there at the moment. You know what I mean?
Really?
Uh, and but Don Solaris, I look on as being quite a fruitful, free time. It's like a time when I felt really free and life was going well and I was unencumbered. I could be really indulgent and musical, and it reflects in the music. Yeah, so that's my favorite one, I think.
When did
Yeah.
remixing start for you? That started pretty early on in your career, didn't it?
Oh, it did. Yeah, yeah. It's as I say, when I did that engineering course, I was working with all kinds of people on all kinds of jobs. I was just happy to exercise the things that I'd learned as an engineer. Um, I got a sense of validation and pride about doing the engineering job. So I'd be doing like things like one of the first jobs I did was the man from Del Monte, because my teacher was ill and he got me in. Instead, like, you take care of this because I can't make it today, kind of thing. So I did that. I did in spirals quite early on,
Yeah.
flying the desk at Square One in Bury. That was terrifying, because I'd never been on like the big desk. But they were really nice people to work with. So Youth, the producer Youth from
Yeah. Yeah.
Killing Joke and all that. He got in touch quite a few times um, for early remixes. And one of them was Naked in the Rain. I don't know if you remember that track, but
Uh,
it was like a number one all around Europe, that track.
all right. Yeah.
Blue Pearl, Naked in the Rain. Look it up on YouTube. It's yeah, there was a demo of that, and I actually wrote a lot of the keyboards into it and redid the rhythm track in a studio in Bury, and it went really well. And that started getting quite a lot of work after that. Um, so things like everyone wanted a remix back then because they picked up the vibe of the club thing. You know, so a lot of indie bands would want to fit in, kind of thing.
Did you do the roses as well?
That was quite late on. That was kind of about 2000 or something, you know, in the
Oh, was
2000s
it?
when we, yeah, because we did that as it was like a remix album project, you know, where they got different remixes to
Oh,
do
yeah,
different.
yeah. The white album. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a really difficult one to do, actually, to keep the how much music to keep in it. You know, this is the thing with remixing. Sometimes it's like, do you actually think with your DJ head on of like what would I actually play, or do you do a decorative reimagining of something? Do you know what I mean? How functioning should it be in a club environment? And yeah, it can wave around, you know, depending on what you're doing. So yeah, I remember the Stone Roses one being trying to find a thing that hooked it, and I like the fact it came up with this kind of almost baroque feel to it. You know, it's kind of it feels a bit classical almost the way we did the synths on it. What else did we do? Did the Shaman early on. Did James.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, there was a period where like uh every remix I did, Weatherall did a remix. Future Sound of London, Papua New Guinea is another one. Primal Scream, Can't Fight It, Feel It.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like a Weatherall mix and a Massey mix kind of thing. And like he was always better. Yeah, no, he was, you know. He was like quite frustrated. It's like, oh, you know, to live in the shadow of it, you know what I mean? But I mean they're quite different, you know, we think completely differently, but yeah, I like that Future Sound of London one. Uh yeah, so yeah.
So, what's life like for you these days? Really, you working on anything at the moment, or?
Yeah, funnily enough, I've been working on some tracks with Brian Duggins from Future Sound of London at the moment.
All right, yeah.
Yeah. You know, we're just sending stuff backwards and forwards. We're not being in a room together for a while. Um, but that's sounding interesting. Doing various remixes. I just done a Henge remix last week. Working on a track for a guy called Jamie Finley, Manchester musician.
All right.
Um, and working on new 808 stuff. I'm sat on quite a bit of new stuff, you know. Could do with finding some vocals for certain things. Some things sound like they need vocals, you know. So need to get on that.
How do you
Uh,
choose who to do? Like, how do you choose which tracks suit vocals and stuff?
well, you just get a feel for it. You know if an instrumental works, you know what I mean? Because it doesn't need anything, you know what I mean? It's like uh, going out DJing and stuff, you know, affects the way I've been doing more DJing in recent years, and it's affected the way I've been making tracks for 808, you know. You know what you're putting it next to, you know, like what kind of set you do and you know where to put it. And then there's another kind of more arty side to me where I'm all about the music kind of thing. I have this other group called Toolshed that we've been doing for 30 years. And I do that with Paddy Steer. And at the moment, there's a musician called Alan Keary, Shunya. Uh, I'm going to see him at Band on the Wall tonight, actually. He's got this residency there. It's free in on a 1 month, on a Wednesday once a month. And he's an amazing musician, plays every instrument going kind of thing. But he plays in Toolshed with us, and we've got Howard Jacobs, he's off with Beth Gibbons at the moment, and he can play everything. You know, he's a wind instrument player, but he's an amazing drummer, and he goes to Cuba and learns congas, and you know, everything he does really intensely. You know, and he's
Yeah.
amazing musician. Paddy's an astonishing sort of musician. He's got a thing on there, Freak Zone. If you go on BBC Sounds, Paddy Steer's Experimental Manchester. There's a playlist gone up last week, and it shows you his musical life. We had a band called Home Life, who were on Ninja Tunes. We did that in the 2000s, and I played in that. But I was just like a musician in that, and I loved doing that. You know, I didn't have to organize everything. I didn't have to think all the, you know, a lot of the time being a band, there's all this logistics and behind the scenes sort of administration stuff. You know, I like doing music, and sometimes to be in somebody else's musical situation is brilliant. You know, for me, you know, I like that. We're doing. I had this group called the Sisters of Transistors. I don't know if you heard of them,
No.
but it was an all-girl group, and it just involved transistor organs, you know, like 60s, you know, the Doors kind of organs,
Yeah,
like four of them, and I was the drummer. So I love doing that project. That was great. Yeah, we're just doing mad projects all the time, you know.
You enjoy it? Does that keep music fresh for you then doing these different projects?
Yeah, it's about it's like a musical community in Manchester that all they do it anyway, you know what I mean? It's not about, you know, where you I mean, the musical landscape now is not about any kind of charts and things like that anymore, is it? You know what I mean? It's just it's hard to make a living out of music in that way. I think we were lucky to do it when we did it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But since streaming and all that kind of thing, it's obviously altered things a lot, you know. So you're doing music, and you all the people that are left are the people that are really obsessed with music. I think I find in Manchester. There's a really good music night at the Carlton Club in Whalley Range called Broom,
All right.
Brume, and they have bands coming from Leeds and Liverpool, but it's all about uh, you know, musical experimentation and stuff. And we've always had that in Manchester. There's always been a seam of that going on, and
Yeah.
I have to report that it's very healthy at the moment, and that is one place where you can see it. You know, there's a lot more venues in Manchester at the moment. I think, you know, I know they're under threat all the time, but there is a lot of music going on, and a lot of young people getting involved. You know,
Yeah.
so you know, I think it's pretty healthy. You know.
It's just a shame it's not commercial, is it? And like you say, you can't really make a living off of it anymore.
Well, you can off gigs, you know, and things like that. You know, I think I don't want to be disparaging in that way, but it's like when you used to sell a piece of plastic for, you know, whatever it was back then, 10 quid or whatever, you know, you got a piece of that, you know, but now you just get fractions, you know, so you have to think in other ways. And gigs have been, you know, gigs have been the thing that kept us afloat, you know. Um, But yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't know what to say about that. But other than the fact that, you know, if you're doing music, you wake up thinking about it and you go to bed thinking about it. You know, it's
Yeah.
it's just the way it is. You know, you'd be doing it anyway. You know,
Are you still like as excited about it now as you were 30 years ago?
sometimes, sometimes.
What?
I mean, it's not. You know, sometimes you go, oh my God, I'm 65. Why am I doing this? You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's like the best thing in the world. You know what I mean? It's like there's chemicals that go off in your head when you're doing music that you can't get any other way. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
it's and the fact that you can pass that on to people is an amazing exchange, isn't it? You know what I mean? I've had that since we first started going
yeah,
way back to the teenage, which is like to do gigs is very important to do that social thing. And remember that music is a social interaction, and that people are more wide-minded than you think if you can get it in front of people. A lot of people go, "Oh, I don't like that kind of music," or "I don't like this," But actually, if you put them in a situation where they their atoms are being affected by it.
Did you feel like you
Uh,
want to do that in the early days, always prove yourself right at the start?
uh, and there's a little bit of me that has that kind of there was a thing in playing back then where it was just so much sort of there was the sharing with the other guys you were playing with, that was important, but and the sharing with the audience, but it was just like this over. There was no feeling like playing music, this that you could affect the world around you by making noise. You know what I mean? It's it's very basic. Every culture has it in the world. Every culture has a version of it. But we had it in spades back then. It felt. I've never forgotten it, and I'm always trying to recapture it. No, yeah, I think that's it. I've not given up on that thing of trying to chase that down, and it still happens. So you're asking, like, am I still enthusiastic about it, kind of thing? And it's like, yeah, yeah, I could stop,
Yeah,
but I won't stop because I'm chasing that thing.
yeah, yeah. Good, good.
And it's out there, and if you can find the right people to play with and stuff. I've been lucky on that front that I've got some amazing musical mates, to play with.
Well, was it hard to? You're the last original member of 808 State. Was it hard to carry it on?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean the not in a way. It's kind of it's the way other people view it, I think, more than the way I view it, which I've always been pushing it forward kind of thing. It feels different in that we, at various points in our career, we had a real gang mentality. We were close and we were, um, we enjoyed each other kind of thing. But that was, how long ago is it now? It's getting nearly 40 years, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And we had a lot of, you know, calamities and big things going on. I remember Martin leaving the group on the night before we went on tour on our first American tour.
really.
You know, supposed to meet up at the airport in the morning. He rang up. It's like, I'm not going. And it's like, what? And we all piled into a vehicle and went up to Bolton where he lived and tried to talk him into it, but he didn't.
What did you
Uh,
do? Did you still go?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we weren't going to turn that down, were we? We would have been sued to hell. You know what I mean? It's like, uh, things like that were really kind of painful, and we didn't know whether all the time we didn't know where we were going to survive. There was various points in our career where you think, oh well, this can't carry on, and how can we survive? But yeah, it's an amazing fact that we have survived. For instance, where we did the New Century Hall this last December. And we've been playing a lot of gigs that were like festivals, or we play at people that don't necessarily know the history or understand what it is, why they're playing all this weird instrumental music at us at a festival. It always goes down well, but they don't have the connection, you know what I mean? But when we did the Manchester gig, it felt like that connection was still there, that people have a pride in the culture that it created, kind of thing, and that reflects on everyone that's ever been in the band. You know what I mean? It's a tangled, complicated story that one day I should maybe put down. There's been a lot of ups and downs and stuff, but it's something I'm very proud of, that music, you know what I mean? And it's like I still feel I can represent that music. Yeah.
Have you ever thought of doing an autobiography? You said they should write it down.
Sorry.
Have you ever thought of doing an autobiography? Like you just mentioned there, like you should get it all
There's
out.
lots of ways to sort of do that, and I've got some ideas about how to do it, I think. So yeah, I'm kind of interested in doing it, but I've read some really good ones recently. I don't know if you know Swerve by Mark Hoyle, who was in Dub Sex.
Oh no, is
Uh,
it a good one?
yeah, it's really good because it's like the 80s version of Manchester that I always blank out. It's like, the way the city worked that led up to the rave thing. And there's a lot of people like yourself and Paul Banks doing these podcast things now that are pulling in a lot of the voices from they're not necessarily the music people. They're people who were the logistics of all that scene.
Yeah, yeah.
DJs, scenesters, all that kind of thing. It's an important time at the moment that they're pulling all this stuff together. If you can be, to every book is biased, isn't it? You know what I mean? What I like about Mark's book is it's quite uh, it's not that biased. It's kind of like wide view version of Hume and that kind of scene in Manchester that was all about the colloquial Manchester uh, music is your life kind of thing. That I loved about it. And I remember so many sort of details, like 808 pop up in his book here and there of things I'd forgotten about. And how like in Hume on them crescents, like Gerald had a flat in them crescents. 2 doors up, there was this guy Ed Barton, who was like this eccentric singer-songwriter guy. He'd done his flat out in railway sleepers, so you went in, it was like a log cabin from a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. And we made videos for him. Me and my mate Howard worked for Factory Icon, who made VHS videos. So we were making these videos for Ed. Gerald lived 2 doors up, and Ed made this album, and he got all these bands in from around the country to do cover versions of his tunes. Right. So there's like a Gerald version of Barber Barber, and there's an 808 State version of I'm Sorry Dog. There's who else is on it? Spirals are on it. James are on it. Um, anyway, it's just this mad compilation. But the very fact that and the Rap Assassins do a brilliant track on there, and me and Gerald produced that track, kind of thing. And it was just a mad time of like, this guy should not be in the room with these guys, but they were, because they lived on the same landing. And it's like all these counterintuitive Venn diagrams hitting each other. That was Manchester to me. It was like, it wasn't planned, and it wasn't an A&R guy going, you should work with this guy. You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
organic.
Like you mentioned at the start with the record shop and people going to the cafe and stuff, it was like an exciting time in Manchester, wasn't it? And like creatively and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. And things like the record shop, it's sort of like all the people came through there. They weren't just doing rave stuff. So it's turned out. Got this amplifier, it wasn't working before. I knew if I left it on for about an hour, it'd pop into life, and it just did. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine, it's fine. But yeah, like I was saying, it's been great. Like you mentioned before, doing the podcast and stuff. It's been great hearing stories like you've told me today of your life and career and stuff, and that's why I do it. Really.
Yeah, yeah. It's the wider stories of, yeah, I mean, everything gets polarized, doesn't it? You know what I mean? It's like Manchester is, the usual suspects and the same stories. Whereas it's much the thing that made it colourful, and you mean, like a band like the Happy Mondays, they were like a very Mancunian thing. It shouldn't, you couldn't design it. It was just that set of people on that in that rehearsal room at that time. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
all these. bands. When you go, I remember going to Brazil for the first time, and we met this guy in Brazil, and he didn't realize that all his favorite bands came from Manchester. It's like he loved New Order, he loved the Smiths, totally loved the Smiths. He loved 808 State, and what are the other ones? Mostly them three kind of thing. And his head popped that he realized that they all came from the same town.
It
This
is
weird,
crazy, isn't it?
yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, they're all so diverse and different, and there's something beautiful about that.
it is bizarre. All them great bands and acts have come from there. Just one
Yeah,
little
all
place.
willfully belligerent and so awkward, and just it's a lesson to be yourself and not cower under the scrutiny of others. If it feels right,
Yeah, yeah.
follow your instinct on things. And I'm going back to my musical beginnings. It was a real sense of pride in doing that back then. It's like um, it was encouraged, and it was like a badge of honor, as I say, to be awkward, belligerent, odd, and uh, loud.
You mentioned that fella there in Brazil. Have you had any funny or crazy fan interactions over the years?
Uh, well, no, no, I found them mostly to be good. We had an internet site really early on. We were one of the first bands to have a website going back to like 94, I think. And those guys have been like the guys that run that have become really good mates, like, and have catalogued everything we've done, gigs, releases, and everything much better than any record company ever would do. Like the record companies, it's shocking how they lost tapes and didn't, keep an inventory of everything. Do you know what I mean? They were
Yeah.
just sort of like the people worked there for a few years and then they left, and then people didn't know. The people that worked there then didn't even know the backstories of anything. You know what I mean? Whereas these internet guys have kept a real good timeline and inventory of all this stuff. So I'm really grateful to that level of fandom on things like that. It's brilliant.
The stuff to bring up that you forgot about in your career.
It's just like I can go like, oh, when was that gig? In Academy 2 in roundabout this time. I can go and look it up. It's there. They've done it all, and they don't get paid for it or anything. But I mean, I always try and send them new releases and all the rare stuff that goes on and stuff. But I think a lot of bands have that these days. You know what I mean? They have this interaction with the fans that is a lot deeper than it used to be.
That is a good thing about the internet and social media, though, isn't it? Like you can
Yeah,
interact with each other and stuff.
yeah, yeah. I think it's. Uh, I remember when we started that website in '94, we thought that we would, be able to put music out over it and stuff, and indeed we did. We stuck music up there. But back then it was all like the modems were all like really super slow in that, and it like to download an image would take half an hour. So we were kind of our ambitions were have come true, but it took quite a few years for it to sort of catch up with the idea of what it would be. But it's certainly okay now. But yeah, I think Bandcamp is interesting. When I go finding new music to DJ and all that, I'm always going to Bandcamp, really.
Oh,
Bandcamp's my
really?
go-to, yeah. We have a Bandcamp site ourselves kind of thing. It's like, yeah, we don't have much traffic on it. Yeah, I think we need to address it somehow. It's kind of hidden away there kind of thing. But I like the idea of it very much. And particularly you could, sell t-shirts and things like that through it.
Send me the link. I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, one of the things that we have on there is when we started this website thing, we put a fan club CD out, and it was called State to State One, and it was all kinds of offcuts and B-sides, and I really like that B-side culture of like stuff that won't fit anywhere else. And we've done another two of them over the years, and I've got probably enough to do another two of those kind of thing. And yeah, so that's what lurks on our Bandcamp. You can get those sort of weird B-side album kind of things, because a lot of our stuff is tied up with record company politics. When ZTT got sold to Universal and all that kind of thing. So we can't put those up. We can only put the ones up post that, if you know what I mean.
But is there anything else you'd like to uh, talk about? Like, I know you've got the shows coming up. Is there anything else you want to promote or out like that?
God, I feel like I should, but I don't know this morning. No, no, that's probably yeah. Well, I mean, no, it'd be really good if that they sell tickets so early on now, don't they? Like almost like a year in advance. They were
Yeah, yeah.
selling. They were advertising this gig in December, the last December gig, and it seems crazy to me, because I don't know what I'm doing next week. You know what I mean? I'm not a forward planner like that, So I understand that you know that people trying to fill venues is getting harder and harder. You know what I mean? Particularly now with economics being the way it is. It looks like we're going through another bump, isn't it? So I always appreciate it when people make the effort to come out and support what we do. So
That is
uh,
crazy. Tickets coming out so early, innit? Because, like you say, you don't know what you're doing next week. So people are going to
yeah,
hold on, aren't they, until like November or something, and then buy it
yeah.
then.
And like ticket prices are just insane, aren't they? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like oh, Stevie Wonder's on at the co-op, and I look it up, it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? I could go on holiday.
It is crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's odd out there, to try and hit that mid-venue thing. And we're putting a tour together, and we always get like, oh, why aren't you playing Cardiff and why aren't you playing Bristol and that? And like the agent has to hit a run of things at a certain level in venues that are already booked up. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
it's like a weird patchwork of things. So I feel really bad that we're not playing places like Newcastle and that, because they're always good. Bristol is always great, and we can't play it this year because of the way it's dotted out. But I try and keep my head out of that. You know what I mean? So other people do that. I just have to make sure my wires work on the night.
Have you got a link for tickets or your social
Yeah,
media?
there is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it'll be on the advertise it on Instagram every 2 weeks or something at the moment. Yeah. So if you just go to our Instagram, 808 State Official.
Yeah, I'll leave a
Uh,
link in there. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, we're pretty good on the socials, we've got them all ticking away. Yeah. I mostly do the socials. Yeah.
Oh dear. Do you enjoy that part? Is that a drag as well, doing all that?
I like doing it. Yeah, it's good. It's good. My wife hates it. It's like, what are you doing on that?
So just to finish off, really, you seen as a pioneer of electronic British music, and rightfully so. How do you want yourself in 808 States to be remembered when it's all done?
Um, Well, I just hope there's some, and I do get good feedback that it does mean something to people in their lives as much as a Simon and Garfunkel record or whatever. You know what I mean? Once upon a time, it was considered like some obscure side music that didn't have any validation, but it's not like that, is it? You know what I mean? It's like electronic music is taken really seriously, be it, people are really passionate about it, just like any other form of music. Went to Autechre recently at New Century Hall in Manchester, and their fans are just obsessed, aren't they? Do you know Autechre from Rochdale, right? And
Right, yeah.
you go around, they can fill places all around the world. People love them. I mean, they're a bit Marmite,
I know,
for
yeah.
some people. Yeah,
I'll have
and
to check it out.
it's not easy listening. It's really hard listening, but people love it all in all corners of the earth, kind of thing. These two lads from Rochdale doing it's almost like Aphex kind of Aphex Twin.
Ah, right, yeah.
Is there? Well, I think they're probably some kind of arch rivals or something. Do you know what I mean? Both on board, and they both operate in the same area, and all that side of music during the 90s was really interesting to me. And sometimes I felt I was always pushing in that direction, kind of thing. Whereas uh, because of where we've been and who we were and the dynamic in the group, it never went that way. But I used to go and do gigs with Autechre all the time because they'd be like, "Oh, why are you doing this pop music?" To them, 808 seemed like pop music. And it was like, you should be doing this. It's like, I know you can do this, and it's like, I used to go and support them at places like Contact Theatre and Gilly's Rock World and things like that. And I'd turn up with a load of synths and do some mad improvisation stuff. And they were really encouraging. I actually went on tour with them in America, like a whole American tour, doing an improv set every night before they went on, and in Japan as well. And I loved doing that. That was brilliant because you had to test your metal every night. It was like scary as hell because their audience, you know, they weren't going to like you anyway from the word go. But I like that challenge. I like that sort of jumping off point with music.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
certainly part of it. That risk, that the unknown of music, the mystery of music. I really like that. Whereas, like, when you've had some success, you're probably going to have to do the hits and that. But I found ways around that as well. As I say, we get to do, yeah, cubic in lots in there's improv within the 808 state thing, and I've fought hard to keep that in over the years. And we have a drummer as well, which is like a lot of people are like, why have you got a drummer? It's not electric. But I like the energy that comes off the stage that way, you know what I mean? And our drummer is amazing. He's kind of like he knew our material better than I did when I met him because he grew up just near the studio where we did 90 in Bury.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Drummer. And he was like a metal drummer, he's technically really on it kind of thing, but he really knew our music inside out, so when he's applying himself to it, he knows where he can go with it and what to do with it. He's quite specialized, he's called Carl Sharrock. He's been with us nearly 20 years,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that about carrying the band on. Instead, like actually the people that get in the van are the same people that got in the van for years and years, like the technical guys that work with us, they've been with us for, 30 odd years,
Yeah, I've
It
seen it
feels,
all.
yeah, well, it's a family, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So, so on the surface, it looks like it's just me, but it's not real. It's not how it feels from the inside. It feels like a family,
Yeah, yeah, good, good. Well, it's good to see you still doing it and, like, say, enjoying it at times. Sometimes it does get difficult, but it's great to see that you're still at it and doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a buzz. Yeah, totally a buzz. And
Yeah,
yeah, it's I believe in the music that we've done. Really proud of it.
yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today, Graham. It's been brilliant to speak to you. We've done about 2 hours
Yeah,
now, but I've really enjoyed it.
we've done 2 hours. Well,
It was great, though. I've loved your stories and hearing it and getting to speak to you. It's been an honour, yeah.
great.
Right, thank you.
Have a good day. See you
You
in a
too.
bit.
See you in a bit. Bye, bye.